The Mechanics of Ascension 2012 and Beyond by Danny Searle. Part 5. Activate your 12-strand DNA. What the ancient Hopi Indians called the blue star Kachina is what we now know as a galactic superwave. Synchrotron radiation is carried by the superwave and is responsible for previous animal mutations. 99% of all life on Earth has been wiped out on at least 3 occasions in the past. The 1% of life that did survive mutated into a new species and evolved new traits. This all happened in 1 generation. Emotions directly affect the structure of our DNA, which directly shapes the physical world we experience every day. Of the 64 possibilities of amino acids, only 20 are turned on right now. But now we know that there is a switch that turns off and turns on where those coding sites lie. We have already learnt in Part 4 that synchrotron radiation carried in the superwave permeates all life forms on Earth, including humans. And remember that DNA works as an antenna for light. So the radiation, or light, is the trigger to activate the switch to turn on the new amino acids in your DNA, all 64.
So when I look at the surface of the cell, actually instead of being smooth, there are all these structures like antennas sticking up all over the surface and proteins built into the membrane. And that these proteins read the environment and convert that environmental signal into a behavior. Let me explain how it works. Here's the membrane. Here are 2 different proteins. I'm going to tell you right now, there are thousands and thousands of proteins in the cell membrane, but I can divide them into 2 groups. 2 groups. One group has antennas on it. And antennas are receivers, just like your television antenna on top of your house before cable. When you had an antenna on the top, what was its function? To pick up a signal. And then what happened to that signal? It was transmitted down the wire to the television, and the television converted the signal into something you could see. Well, here's the point. Many of the receptors in the cell have these antennas sticking up from the cell. So if I go back, these are the antennas sticking up from the surface of the cell right here. And what they're tuned to are not television stations, they're tuned to environmental information. It might be glucose, for example. Is there sugar out there? Or histamine. Is there histamine out there which tells me to get ready for an emergency response? Or is there something like insulin which tells me to change my metabolic pathway? For every different thing the cell can see, it has a different antenna. So that means the cells are covered over the surface with antennas for everything the cell can deal with. So the signals come in and picked up by the antenna, but then they're converted into the behavior by the second class of proteins. There are 3 different kinds. Channels, which are just like olives with a hole in the middle of them where information can go in. Enzymes, which are proteins that cause metabolism to occur. Or cytoskeletal proteins, proteins that change the shape of the cell. So if a signal comes in, let's say a toxic signal comes in, and this is a receiver for that, and it couples to the skeleton, it says, it's toxic signal, turn around and start running the other way, then this is the input and this is the output. So the proteins work in combination. Receptors receive signals. Do you have receptors? Yeah. What are the obvious ones? Eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch. Where are all your receptors located? In the skin. So you and the cell are parallels, but it doesn't look like an eye and it doesn't look like a nose, but its function is exactly the same. It's the equivalent of an eye. If this was tuned to light, a photon of light would hit this antenna and that cell would respond like an eye and say, I see the light. And once it sees the light, it has to convert that information, and it uses it by connecting to this, and I'm going to show you how that happens. So the input, the antenna, connects to the output, which makes the behavior. Let me explain how it works. So we'll use this model right here of a receptor. Let's see. This receptor is going to, I'm going to show it to you in dynamic motion. Here's my membrane, bread and butter sandwich. Here's my antenna, and this is the antenna scouring the environment for a signal. Look at the shape because the protein goes into the cell. Look at the shape. What happens when a protein binds to a signal? Changes shape. Well, watch what happens. See, when the signal came in, and watch what happens when the signal goes away. Should I do that one more time so you can see that? Okay, basically it says this, is that the proteins are in the cell, that these receptors are migrating through the surface of the cell. Okay, here it is. Are you going to come start moving soon? Okay, here's the protein. It's scanning the environment, looking for signals. And let's say it's an insulin receptor. If there's insulin, I would activate the receptor. But look, no activation of the receptor. There's no change in shape. But when the insulin shows up, I change the shape. So if I'm inside the cell, if we were inside the cell and these proteins were hanging down from the ceiling, would you be able to tell if insulin was here or not by the shape of the protein? Yeah. So if you're inside the cell, you can tell what's going on outside. Okay? Now the next thing is this. After I receive a signal, I actually have to send a secondary signal into the cell to activate the behavior of the cell. So in this case, I'm going to use a channel, which is like an olive. And what happens is this. This protein moves around through the membrane. See, it's closed at the top. Nothing can get through. But when it opens, it makes a channel where signal molecules can shoot inside the cell. And the bottom line is this. The only thing that can go through this channel is what fits. If the molecule doesn't fit, it doesn't go through the channel. So basically it says this. In the resting state, the protein is closed. But when activated, the protein opens. And when it opens, it allows signals to go into the cell and coordinate the behavior of the cell. So now that we've looked at that, let's put the two together and then show you what is this mechanism that controls biology. The two together, the input and the output. This is looking for the environmental signal, and this is going to convert that signal into behavior. This is the connector. Look at the shape. Does it fit here, yes or no? Okay, so that means no signal is present. So no behavior. But when the signal shows up, I change the shape. When the shape is changed, then I connect it, open this one up, and see this? This is a signal that tells the cell to do something, and it's going to do whatever's connected to that. So the bottom line is the behavior of the cell is controlled by the input of the environment, and then the conversion of that input into a behavior signal that coordinates the function of the cell to respond to what's going on in the environment. Interesting point. If I cut the antenna off the cell so it cannot see anything, there's no behavior. The cell is totally comatose. It'll sit there, and what does that mean? It says then behavior is related to the signal. If there's no signal, there's no behavior. So it's like reflex, stimulus, response. The signal is the stimulus, and then the cell creates a response. So basically it goes like this. The receptor is the input. It reads the environment. The receptor then connects to the effector, which generates the behavior through a secondary signal. The primary signal, this is the secondary signal that activates the behavior of the cell. So that this unit is controlling a specific aspect of behavior. But there's like thousands of these different kinds of units simultaneously. So this is an example of just a switch. It's a switch. When insulin shows up, switch on metabolism. When histamine shows up, switch on protection.
There are hundreds of antennae on the surface of your cells, but one of these antennae is designed for one purpose, to detect and pick up synchrotron radiation. The synchrotron radiation can only enter the cell if the antenna is sitting upright. Once it enters the cell, it can begin to interact with your DNA. So how do we make sure the antenna is sitting upright? Well, it's the same as before, depending on your vibration, fear or love. This will directly influence whether or not the antenna is sitting upright or lying down flat. It'll also determine how many contact points will be encoded on your DNA. So now you can begin to see the importance of a love vibration. Fear is a long, slow wave of emotion and touches relatively few sites on the DNA. So an individual living in fear is limited to the number of antennae that they have available to them. Love is a higher frequency, shorter wavelength, so a person living in the love vibration has many more potential sites for coding along that genetic pattern. In this comparison, we can see how few coding points there are for a fear-based vibration and how many there are for a love vibration. Looking at it this way, it's really a no-brainer. The new contact points mean your body can code for more proteins. Coding for more proteins means more DNA strands. So a person vibrating in the love emotion will be able to activate 12 strands of DNA. So why do we need 12 strands of DNA? Well, simple. The full set of 12-strand DNA is a digital key. This key is required to boot up or turn on your dormant DNA. So you remember that 97% previously called junk DNA? Now we're going to turn it on. Think of it like a combination lock, and only one key will fit the lock and be able to open it. Well, that one key is 12-strand DNA, and only 12-strand DNA can open your dormant operating system. That is why I call it cosmic evolution. It is the next stage in human evolution, but no one can do it for you. This is a personal journey that you must complete for yourself. So let's break it down one more time. The light from the blue star will trigger amino acids to start coding. Your emotional vibration will determine how many amino acids get switched on. The more amino acids you switch on, the more DNA strands your body can build. If you are operating in the love consciousness, you are guaranteed to activate 12 strands of DNA. Your 12-strand DNA is required to activate your dormant DNA. Your dormant DNA will unlock universal wisdom and transport you to a fifth-dimensional state of existence. It couldn't be any more simple. All you need is love.
All you need is love. All together. All you need is love. Everybody. All you need is love. Love. Love is all you need. 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 Love is all you need.
In part 6, we will learn how to fast-track our vibrational state to one of love by activating our pineal gland. If you have come this far, you really don't want to miss this one.